You're 18 years old, standing in an open doorway. 3,000 feet of nothing between you and the jungle below. No armor, no cover. Just you, a machine gun, and every enemy soldier on the ground, pointing their rifles straight up at your chest. This is the story of the helicopter door gunner in Vietnam. The most exposed man in the most exposed war. By the end of this, you'll understand why door gunners said they felt safer on the ground than in the air. Vietnam wasn't supposed to be a helicopter war. In the early 1960s, choppers were just transport, logistics, moving supplies from point A to point B. Nobody thought they'd become the backbone of American combat operations. But the jungle changed everything. Dense canopy, no roads, rivers cutting through mountains, the Viet Cong hiding in villages that looked like every other village. The U.S. needed speed, mobility, the ability to drop soldiers into combat zones faster than the enemy could react. So they turned to the helicopter. And the helicopter turned into a target. At first, there were no door gunners. Just pilots and crew chiefs trying to land in clearings while getting shot at from every direction. The Viet Cong figured it out fast. Helicopters flew low, helicopters flew slow, and helicopters couldn't shoot back. So they started ambushing landing zones. Waiting in tree lines, hidden in tall grass, letting the chopper get close, rotors kicking up dust, troops about to jump out. Then they'd open fire. The first door gunners were improvised. Crew chiefs who grabbed whatever machine gun they could find and started shooting back. Volunteers who stood in the open door with an M60 and hoped they'd see the muzzle flash before the bullet found them. By 1965, it was official. Every Huey carried 2 door gunners, one on each side, standing in the wind, scanning the jungle, waiting for the world to explode. The primary weapon was the M60 machine gun. 7.62 millimeter, 550 rounds per minute, 1,100 meters of effective range if you could hold it steady while standing in a vibrating metal box flying through the sky. The M60D was the aircraft version. Spade grips instead of a buttstock, mounted on a bungee cord system that let the gunner swing it in almost any direction. Because there were mechanical stops built into the mount to keep you from shooting your own rotor blades off, or hitting the tail boom, or blowing a hole in the fuel tank directly behind your head. But a lot of gunners hated the official mounts. Too restrictive, too slow. So they rigged their own systems. Bungee cords tied to the ceiling. Free-swinging setups that let them lean out over the skids and fire straight down at targets passing underneath. Going in hot. It gave them more range of motion. It also meant one wrong move, and you'd fall 300 feet into the jungle. Most gunners wore a monkey harness, a simple strap around the waist clipped to the inside of the aircraft. It wasn't rated for much, wasn't designed to stop you from being thrown out during a hard bank or a violent evasive maneuver. But it was all you had. Here's what you need to understand. A door gunner wasn't like a bomber crew at 30,000 feet, wasn't like a tank crew behind inches of steel, wasn't even like an infantryman who could dive into a trench when the shooting started. A door gunner had nothing. No armor plating on the doors, no bulletproof glass. The floor of a Huey was thin aluminum, the kind of metal that buckles when you step on it wrong. So gunners sat on their body armor. Not wore it, sat on it. Because the biggest threat wasn't coming from the side. It was coming from directly below. AK-47 rounds punching up through the floor, tracer fire from heavy machine guns tracking the helicopter across the sky, RPGs screaming toward the engine cowling. And you're standing there, in the open, watching it all come at you. The worst part was the landing zones. Hot LZs. When the Viet Cong knew you were coming, the helicopter slows down, starts to descend. Rotor wash kicks up a cloud of red dust that blinds everyone on the ground and everyone in the air. The pilots can't see. The troops in the back can't see. But the door gunner has to see. Because somewhere in that dust cloud, somewhere in the tree line 100 meters away, there are men with rifles, men with machine guns, men with rocket-propelled grenades. And they're all aiming at you. Your job is simple. Suppress the enemy. Put enough bullets down range that they keep their heads down long enough for the infantry to jump out and run for cover. But you're doing this while standing in a doorway, while the helicopter bucks and sways, while the M60 vibrates in your hands and shell casings bounce off the metal floor, and the pilots are screaming over the radio, and the guy next to you is praying out loud because the last chopper in the formation just got hit and went down burning. You don't aim. You don't have time. You just point the gun at the tree line and hold the trigger. The North Vietnamese army wasn't stupid. They studied American tactics. They captured training manuals. They drew diagrams of helicopters with red circles around the most vulnerable points. The engine, the transmission, the pilot's compartment. One NVA field manual told soldiers to aim 1.5 helicopter lengths ahead of a moving Huey, leading the target, hitting the engine before the aircraft even realized it was under fire. They knew the landing zones. There were only so many clearings in the jungle big enough to land a helicopter. The NVA booby-trapped them, rigged explosives triggered by rotor wash, positioned machine gun teams in interlocking fields of fire. The Viet Cong and regular North Vietnamese forces both used these tactics. Different organizations, same deadly threat from the ground. They called it the Wall of Lead. Entire squads lying on their backs in the grass, rifles pointed straight up, firing full auto as the helicopters passed overhead. Hundreds of bullets filling the air. You couldn't dodge. You couldn't evade. You just flew through it and hoped. But the real nightmare was the 12.7mm heavy machine gun. Soviet-made, mounted on a tripod or dug into a fortified position, firing rounds the size of your thumb. One hit could tear through the transmission. One hit could sever a hydraulic line. One hit could take your leg off at the knee. During the siege of Khe Sanh, NVA gunners positioned 12.7 emplacements on the hills surrounding the airstrip. Helicopters couldn't land normally. They had to dive from 3,000 feet, dropping like a rock, pulling up at the last second in what pilots called a controlled crash. The door gunners held on. Watched the ground rush up. Prayed the pilots didn't miscalculate. Then there were the RPGs. Rocket-propelled grenades. Shoulder-fired fast, lethal. You'd see the flash from the tree line, a streak of white smoke, and you'd have maybe 2 seconds to yell a warning before it hit. Most of the time it missed. But when it didn't, the helicopter came apart in the air. Rotor blades snapping, fuselage disintegrating, fire spreading through the cabin. If you were lucky, you died instantly. If you weren't, you wrote it down. Burning, screaming, watching the jungle rush up to meet you. The Viet Cong adapted to everything. Door gunners used colored smoke grenades to mark targets for gunships. Purple smoke meant enemy position. Yellow smoke meant friendly troops. So the VC started carrying their own smoke grenades. A door gunner would toss purple smoke to mark a machine gun nest. Seconds later, 3 more purple smoke grenades would pop in different locations. The gunships wouldn't know which one to hit. And while they circled, trying to figure it out, the real machine gun kept firing. This wasn't a rare mission. This was daily life. It was psychological warfare, designed to make you doubt everything you saw. Every morning started the same way. You'd wake up in a tent or a hooch, humid air already thick with heat, mosquitoes buzzing, smell of fuel and sweat and mildew. You'd check your gear. M60, ammunition, extra belts, smoke grenades, your body armor that you'd sit on instead of wear. And you'd think about the odds. Thousands of helicopters were destroyed in Vietnam. Crew deaths made up a substantial portion of American combat fatalities. You do the math in your head. But those were just the averages. In a hot LZ, the odds were worse. Much worse. The worst part wasn't your own fear. It was watching the other helicopters. You'd be in formation, 6 Hueys in a staggered line, all heading to the same landing zone, all carrying troops, all hopping to get in and out before the shooting started. Then you'd see it. Smoke trail. The lead bird shudders, spins, starts to fall. You'd watch the door gunner try to hold on. Watch him realize it's over. Watch the helicopter disappear into the canopy and explode in a ball of orange flame. And you'd know. You'd know that could be you in 30 seconds. But it wasn't just the fear of dying. It was what you had to do to survive. Recon by fire, they called it. Shooting into villages before you even knew if the enemy was there. Firing into tree lines, into huts, into anything that moved. Some gunners were 18 years old. Farm boys from Iowa, kids from Brooklyn, teenagers who'd never fired a gun before boot camp. Now they're standing in a doorway with a machine gun, making life and death decisions in half a second. Anyone running is VC. That's what some were told. And when you're scared and the adrenaline is pumping and you've watched 3 of your friends die in the last week, you pull the trigger. Later, you'd lie awake in your bunk, wondering, were they soldiers? Were they farmers? Did you just kill a kid? You'd never know. And that not knowing would follow you home. But there were also moments of extraordinary courage. Larry Colburn was a door gunner flying with Warrant Officer Hugh Thompson during a routine reconnaissance mission over a village called My Lai. What they saw below made them sick. American soldiers killing unarmed civilians, women, children, elderly villagers executed in ditches. Thompson landed his helicopter between the soldiers and the civilians. Cover me. Colburn swung his M60 toward the American infantry, not at the enemy, at his own side. If they fire on these people, you fire on them. There was a stare down. American soldiers with rifles, an American door gunner with an M60, Vietnamese civilians huddled behind them. Nobody fired. Thompson evacuated the survivors. Colburn kept his gun trained on the men who were supposed to be his brothers. It was the right thing to do. But it destroyed him for years. Because that's what the door gunners' war did. It put you in impossible situations where there were no good choices. Only survival. Let me take you through what a typical hot LZ actually felt like. You're on the 4th bird in a 6-ship formation, assault helicopter company. Your call sign is Slick 24. The LZ is 5 clicks west of the A Shao Valley. Intelligence says it's cold. Intelligence is wrong most of the time. You're at 1,500 feet. The crew chief on the left side taps your shoulder and points down. You lean out into the wind and scan the jungle. Nothing but green, thick canopy. A few clearings that could be LZs or could be kill zones. The radio crackles. 2 minutes. You pull the charging handle on the M60. Chamber around. Run your hand along the ammunition belt. 2,000 rounds in a custom ammo can you built yourself from spare parts and duct tape. The lead bird starts its descent. You follow. The formation tightens. Helicopters so close you can see the other door gunners looking back at you. One of them gives you a thumbs up. You nod. The jungle is rushing up now. You can see individual trees, a dirt road, a river snaking through the valley. Get ready. The crew chief is yelling over the rotor noise. You brace yourself against the door frame, feet planted on the skids, monkey harness clipped in, M60 pointed at the tree line. Muzzle flashes. Taking fire left side. The crew chief opens up, tracers streaming from his gun into the jungle. You swing your M60 right and scan for targets. There. Movement in the tree line. You pull the trigger. The gun roars, vibration running up your arms, shell casings flying past your face, the smell of cordite and hot metal filling your nose. The rotor wash is kicking up dust now, red dirt swirling. You can't see anything. You're firing blind, aiming at where you think the enemy is. Then you hear it. Ping, ping, ping. Rounds hitting the fuselage. The pilots are screaming. Going in hot, going in hot. You feel the helicopter flare, nose up, tail down. The skids hit dirt and the infantry in the back are already jumping out. You keep firing, sweeping the tree line left to right. The M60 is so hot the barrel is starting to glow. More muzzle flashes. You think just get them out alive. The last soldier jumps out and the pilot pulls pitch. The helicopter lurches up. You're still firing, the jungle dropping away beneath you. Clear, clear, we're clear. You release the trigger. Your ears are ringing. You look back at the LZ. Black smoke rising from the tree line where your rounds hit. The infantry is already taking cover. And behind you, Slick 25 is starting its approach. Right into the same hell you just left. Back at base, you climb out of the helicopter. The crew chief is checking the aircraft for damage. 12 holes in the fuselage. One round went through the floor right between where you were standing. 6 inches to the left, and you'd be dead. You sit down on the sandbags. Light a cigarette. You hear the rotors of the next flight spinning up. 30 minutes until you're back in the air. 30 minutes until it happens all over again. You take a drag and stare at the jungle in the distance. Tomorrow you'll do it again. And the day after that. And the day after that. Until your tour ends. Or until your luck runs out. Thousands of helicopters served in Vietnam. Many were destroyed. Crew members were killed in numbers that rivaled the heaviest combat units. That's pilots, crew chiefs, door gunners. Men who were supposed to fly above the war but ended up in the worst of it. The nature of their injuries was catastrophic. Amputations, burns, traumatic brain injuries from crashes, the kind of wounds that changed you forever. But the wounds you couldn't see were just as bad. Post-traumatic stress, survivor's guilt, moral injury. A door gunner named Jim Chancellor later described having to throw people off an overloaded helicopter during an evacuation. Too heavy, were sagging. He grabbed a man and threw him off, while firing his M60 with the other hand. The helicopter lifted off. The man he threw off was captured and killed. Chancellor carried that for the rest of his life. Ask any door gunner what they remember most. It's not the firefights. It's not the medals or the missions. It's the sound. The sound of the Huey's rotors. That rhythmic whump-whump-whump that meant help was coming. That meant you might make it home. For the infantry on the ground, the helicopter was salvation. For the door gunner, it was a flying coffin with open doors. But they climbed in anyway. Every single day. Because somebody had to. The door gunners of Vietnam were the vanguard of a new kind of warfare. They turned the helicopter from a transport vehicle into a weapon system. They perfected aerial gunnery under the worst possible conditions. They wrote the manual that every modern aerial gunner still uses. The special mission aviators in today's military owe everything to those kids, standing in Huey doorways over the jungles of Vietnam. But the price they paid was unimaginable. Many never made it home. Many who did make it home never really left Vietnam. The Door Gunners' War was unique in military history. They weren't protected by distance like bomber crews. They weren't protected by armor like tank crews. They weren't even protected by cover like infantry. They stood in an open doorway, at 300 feet, over hostile jungle, with nothing but a machine gun and a harness that might not hold. And they did it knowing that every landing zone could be their last, that every mission could end with their helicopter spinning into the trees. In most wars, soldiers seek cover. They dig foxholes, build bunkers, hide behind walls. But the helicopter door gunner had no cover. By design. Because their job wasn't to hide. Their job was to be seen. To draw fire away from the troops on the ground. To stand in that doorway and fight back. Some jobs in war don't give you cover. They make you the target.